Long before there was a nation called Germany, the land at the heart of Europe was wild, untamed, and full of mystery. Thick forests stretched for miles, rivers like the Rhine and the Danube carved through the land, and scattered among them lived dozens of tribes, fierce, independent, and proud. This was not yet Germany, but it was already home to the Germanic people. Around 500 BC, small tribal communities began to form across the lands that today include Germany, Denmark, and parts of Poland and the Netherlands. These tribes didn't think of themselves as one people. They were separate clans: the Saxons, Franks, Goths, Vandals, Angles, and many others. Each tribe had its own leaders, traditions, and gods. They worshipped nature. Thunder, forests, and rivers were sacred. The most powerful among their gods was Woden, or Odin, the god of war and wisdom. To the south, the mighty Roman Empire began to rise. By the 1st century BC, Rome had conquered much of Europe: Gaul, Spain, Britain, and their next goal was to bring the northern forests under Roman rule. But the Romans quickly learned that the Germanic tribes would not be conquered so easily. In 9 AD, the Roman general Varus led 3 legions into the Teutoburg forest and never came back. The tribes, united under a chieftain named Arminius, ambushed the Romans in a stormy forest, destroying over 20,000 soldiers. This shocking defeat stopped Rome's expansion across the Rhine River and forever changed European history. That battle made Arminius a hero in German legend, remembered as the first man to unite the tribes, even if only for a short time. For the next few centuries, the tribes continued to fight, sometimes against each other, sometimes together against Rome. They traded, farmed, and slowly grew stronger. By the 4th and 5th centuries, the world began to change. The Roman Empire, weakened by wars and corruption, started to crumble. Germanic tribes moved into its lands, some seeking peace, others conquest. The Visigoths invaded Spain, the Ostrogoths ruled Italy, the Vandals reached North Africa, and the Franks settled in what is now France and Western Germany. Out of these migrations and wars, a new identity began to form. The land that would one day be called Germany became a crossroads of tribes and cultures: Celtic, Roman, and Germanic influences all mixing together. By the 6th century, one tribe began to rise above the others: the Franks, led by their powerful king Clovis. He united many tribes under his rule and converted to Christianity, bringing new faith to the region. This Christian influence spread east, slowly transforming pagan tribes into early kingdoms. Then came one of the greatest rulers of all time, Charlemagne, or Charles the Great. In the late 700s, he built a vast empire that stretched from France deep into German lands. He brought order, law, and education, and encouraged the building of churches and monasteries. In 800 AD, Charlemagne was crowned Emperor of the Romans, marking the birth of what would later become the Holy Roman Empire. It was not yet the Germany we know today, but the roots had been planted. The ancient tribes had become kingdoms. Their languages, beliefs, and courage would form the foundation of a nation that would rise, fall, and rise again many times through history. The story of Germany had begun. The Holy Roman Empire, 800 to 1500. When Charlemagne was crowned emperor in 800 AD, a new dream was born: to create a Christian empire that would unite all the people of Europe under one crown, one faith, and one law. It was called the Holy Roman Empire, and for the next 700 years, it would shape the heart of Europe, especially the lands we now call Germany. After Charlemagne's death, his huge empire was divided among his grandsons. The western part became France. The eastern part, the land of forests, rivers, and castles, became the kingdom of the East Franks, ruled by kings who would later call themselves German. This was the beginning of medieval Germany. In the 900s, one man rose to power: Otto the Great. He was strong, clever, and determined to bring order to the feuding lords and dukes of the land. In 962, Otto was crowned by the Pope in Rome as the new Holy Roman Emperor, reviving Charlemagne's dream. Under Otto, Germany became the center of a vast empire stretching from the North Sea to Italy. But the empire was not like France or England. It was not one country. Instead, it was made up of hundreds of tiny states, duchies, bishoprics, and free cities, each ruled by its own prince or bishop. They all owed loyalty to the emperor, but they also guarded their independence. This strange system would define Germany for centuries. Strong local rulers, weak central control, and endless politics. The Middle Ages were an age of castles, knights, and cathedrals. Magnificent churches rose across the land, in Cologne, Mainz, and Bamberg. Trade grew in the northern cities of Hamburg and Lübeck, where merchants formed the Hanseatic League, a powerful trade network that connected Germany to Scandinavia, England, and Russia. German craftsmen, miners, and traders became famous across Europe. Life, however, was not easy. Peasants worked hard on their lord's land. Wars between rival dukes were common. Still, faith gave people hope. Monasteries copied books, taught the poor, and preserved knowledge. Pilgrims traveled to holy sites, and festivals filled the towns with color and song. By the 11th and 12th centuries, great dynasties like the Hohenstaufens ruled the empire. Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, with his red beard and iron will, became a legend. He dreamed of uniting all of Italy and Germany under one rule, but constant wars with the popes weakened his power. In the end, he died crossing a river on his way to the Crusades, yet his name lived on as a symbol of strength and unity. As time went on, the power of the emperor faded. In 1356, the Golden Bull was issued, a document that changed the empire forever. It said that the emperor would no longer be chosen by birthright, but by 7 electors, powerful princes and archbishops who held the true power of Germany. This made the empire more of a partnership among nobles than a monarchy. Despite its divisions, the Holy Roman Empire became a center of learning, art, and music. Universities opened in Heidelberg and Prague. Gothic cathedrals reached toward the sky. Poets and scholars wrote in the early German language, helping to shape a common culture even across many borders. But in the late 1400s, the empire began to change again. The Renaissance was spreading from Italy, bringing new ideas, science, and discovery. Printing presses appeared, and knowledge spread faster than ever before. Ordinary people started to question the world around them, and soon even their faith. A storm was coming, one that would shake the empire to its core. The Middle Ages of Germany were ending, and the age of Reformation and rebirth was about to begin. The Reformation and the 30 Years' War, 1500 to 1648. By the early 1500s, the Holy Roman Empire was powerful in name, but deeply divided in reality. Across the land, hundreds of princes ruled their own territories, collecting taxes, raising armies, and following their own laws. But in one thing, they were united. The Catholic Church was at the center of life. Its priests guided the people, its cathedrals dominated every town, and its wealth reached into every corner of the empire. Yet beneath the surface, change was coming. People were beginning to ask questions about faith, about corruption, and about the power of Rome. In 1517, a monk named Martin Luther walked to the door of the castle church in Wittenberg, a small town in Saxony, and nailed a document to it. It contained 95 theses, a list of statements questioning the church's practices, especially the selling of indulgences, payments people made to forgive sins. Luther did not plan to start a revolution. He only wanted debate, but his words spread like wildfire. Thanks to the newly invented printing press, his ideas reached every corner of the empire. For the first time, ordinary people could read his words in their own language. They began to believe that faith was not about money or power, but about a personal connection to God. This movement became known as the Protestant Reformation. Luther was soon called to appear before the Emperor, Charles V, at the Diet of Worms in 1521. There he was ordered to take back his words. He refused. Standing tall, he said, "Here I stand, I can do no other." It was one of the most powerful moments in history, one man defying both emperor and church in the name of conscience. His courage inspired millions. Across Germany, princes began choosing sides. Some stayed loyal to the Pope, while others became Protestant and broke away from Rome. The empire split along religious lines, and Europe entered an age of conflict. The wars that followed were not just about faith, they were about power, land, and survival. For more than a century, Germany became a battlefield. Farmers and towns were caught between marching armies, cities burned, families fled. And in 1618, the worst conflict of all began, the 30 Years' War. It started in the city of Prague when angry Protestant nobles threw Catholic officials out of a castle window. That small act of rebellion exploded into one of the deadliest wars in European history. The conflict dragged in almost every major power of the time: Austria, Spain, Sweden, France, and countless German states. Armies crossed the land again and again, leaving only ashes behind. The war became less about religion and more about control. Villages starved, towns were destroyed, and disease spread everywhere. It's said that in some parts of Germany, half the population died. It was a time of horror when faith in humanity seemed lost. But even in darkness, seeds of change were planted. When the war finally ended in 1648 with the Peace of Westphalia, the map of Europe was redrawn. Germany was left divided into hundreds of small, independent states. But from this tragedy came a new idea: that each nation should have the right to choose its own religion, and that no emperor should rule the conscience of all. The Holy Roman Empire survived, but it was forever changed. The Reformation had broken its unity, yet it also gave birth to new freedoms, new ways of thinking, and a new spirit that would shape Germany's future. Out of fire and faith, the modern German identity began to take form. Rise of Prussia and the road to unification, 1648 to 1871. When the 30 Years' War ended in 1648, Germany lay in ruins. Cities were burned, farmlands were empty, and millions were dead. The Holy Roman Empire still existed, but only in name. It was no longer an empire of unity, but a patchwork of over 300 tiny states, each ruled by its own prince, bishop, or duke. Among these broken pieces, one small kingdom began to rise: Prussia. In the north, along the cold shores of the Baltic Sea, the rulers of Brandenburg had built a reputation for discipline and strength. Their capital, Berlin, was not yet a grand city, but it had ambition. The man who began Prussia's transformation was Frederick William, known as the Great Elector. He rebuilt his lands after the war, formed a powerful army, and invited refugees and skilled workers from across Europe to settle in his domain. He taught his people order, hard work, and loyalty, traits that would define Prussia for centuries. His grandson, Frederick the Great, took those lessons and turned Prussia into a European power. Frederick was a man of contradictions, a lover of art and music, yet one of the greatest military minds of his time. He modernized the army, built schools, reformed the government, and brought Enlightenment ideas into his court. But he also led Prussia into fierce wars against Austria, France, and Russia to expand its territory and prove its might. Under his rule, Prussia became known for discipline, efficiency, and strength. By the late 1700s, Germany was changing. The Enlightenment had filled Europe with new ideas about science, freedom, and reason. German philosophers like Immanuel Kant and writers like Goethe and Schiller made their land a center of learning and art. But politically, Germany was still divided. While France had a single king and England had a parliament, Germany remained a puzzle of small states, each proud but powerless alone. Then came a storm from the west: Napoleon Bonaparte. In the early 1800s, the French emperor swept across Europe, crushing armies and crowning himself master of the continent. In 1806, he destroyed the old Holy Roman Empire, ending nearly 1,000 years of history. For the first time in centuries, Germany had no emperor, only occupied lands and defeated kings. But Napoleon's rule also planted a dangerous seed: the idea of German unity. As people fought against French domination, they began to see themselves not just as Bavarians or Saxons, but as Germans. Poets, soldiers, and students dreamed of a single nation, free and strong. After Napoleon's defeat in 1815, the Congress of Vienna restored peace to Europe. It created the German Confederation, a loose alliance of 39 states. At its heart were two rivals, Austria and Prussia, both fighting to lead the German world. For the next 50 years, this rivalry would define German politics. Then in the mid-1800s, one man appeared who would finally unite the nation, Otto von Bismarck. He was a master strategist, known as the Iron Chancellor. Bismarck believed that speeches and ideals alone could not unite Germany. It would take, as he said, blood and iron. Through clever diplomacy and 3 short wars, he achieved what centuries of dreamers could not. First, he defeated Denmark to bring northern German lands under Prussian control. Then he turned against Austria, defeating it in 1866 and uniting most German states under Prussian leadership. Finally, in 1870, war broke out with France, the old rival. When the German armies triumphed, Bismarck saw his moment. In 1871, in the Grand Hall of the Palace of Versailles, the German princes gathered to proclaim their new emperor, Kaiser Wilhelm I of Prussia. For the first time in history, Germany was united as one nation. From the ruins of war, a new empire had risen, strong, proud, and ambitious. The dream of a united Germany, born in centuries of division, had at last become real. The German Empire and the World Wars, 1871 to 1945. In 1871, Germany stood united for the first time in history. From the ashes of war, a new empire had risen, powerful, industrial, and proud. The German Empire, led by Kaiser Wilhelm I and his chancellor, Otto von Bismarck, quickly became one of Europe's most advanced nations. Its factories produced steel, ships, and machines. Its scientists and engineers transformed the modern world. Berlin, once a quiet city, now buzzed with ambition and energy. Bismarck's vision was clear. He wanted peace to protect the new empire. He built alliances, avoided unnecessary wars, and focused on building a strong economy and society. Under his leadership, Germany grew richer and more confident. But when the old emperor died and Kaiser Wilhelm II took the throne in 1888, everything began to change. Wilhelm II was young, proud, and restless. He wanted Germany to be not just a European power, but a global one. He dismissed Bismarck and began building a mighty navy to rival Britain's. German colonies appeared in Africa and the Pacific. The Kaiser spoke of Germany's place in the sun, but his ambitions made the other great powers nervous. An arms race began, new battleships, new weapons, and new alliances, all preparing for a conflict that no one truly wanted. By 1914, Europe was a powder keg. When an Austrian archduke was assassinated in Sarajevo, the spark was lit. Germany supported Austria, Russia supported Serbia, and soon the whole continent was at war. The First World War had begun. At first, German soldiers marched proudly, believing the war would end in a few months. But it dragged on for 4 long years, through mud, blood, and endless trenches. Millions died on the Western Front, fighting for yards of ground. Germany's strength began to fade under the weight of hunger and loss. By 1918, the empire was collapsing. The Kaiser fled, and Germany declared itself a republic. The once proud empire was gone. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, punished Germany harshly. It lost its colonies, its army was limited, and it had to pay enormous reparations. For ordinary Germans, the treaty felt like humiliation. Poverty and anger spread across the land. People lost faith in politics and turned to anyone who promised hope. In the 1920s, Germany struggled through chaos. Inflation destroyed the economy, and unemployment soared. But it was also a time of creativity. Berlin became a city of art, jazz, and cinema, wild, modern, and restless. Still, beneath the lights, the wounds of war remained open. Then came the Great Depression in 1929. Factories closed, families starved, and desperation filled the streets. Amid the despair, a man rose to power. Adolf Hitler. A failed artist and soldier, he promised to restore Germany's pride and strength. He blamed the Jews, the communists, and the old politicians for the nation's suffering. His words were dangerous, but to a broken people, they sounded like salvation. In 1933, Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. Within a year, democracy was gone. The Nazi Party took total control, banning opposition, burning books, and filling the streets with propaganda. The swastika replaced the old flag, and Hitler's voice echoed through radios across the land. He rebuilt the army, defied the Versailles Treaty, and began preparing for expansion. By 1939, Germany invaded Poland. Once again, Europe was at war. World War II had begun. At first, German forces conquered swiftly. Poland, France, and much of Europe fell under Nazi control. But behind the victories was a terrible darkness. Millions of innocent people, especially Jews, were hunted and murdered in the Holocaust, one of the greatest crimes in human history. As the war dragged on, Germany faced fierce resistance. The Soviet Union pushed from the east, the Allies from the west. Cities like Dresden and Berlin were reduced to rubble. By 1945, Hitler was dead, the Nazis had fallen, and Germany lay in ruins once more. What had begun as a dream of unity and greatness had ended in devastation and shame. But even in defeat, a new chapter waited, one that would rise from the ruins of war. When World War II ended in 1945, Germany was no longer an empire. It was a graveyard. Cities were destroyed, millions were dead, and the once mighty nation lay in ruins. The victorious Allies, the United States, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, met to decide what to do with the broken land. They split Germany into 4 occupation zones, each controlled by one of the powers. Berlin, the capital, was divided too, even though it sat deep inside the Soviet zone. At first, there was hope that Germany might recover together. But as the world entered the Cold War, that hope faded fast. The West, led by America and Britain, wanted democracy and free markets. The East, led by the Soviet Union, wanted communism and control. Germany became the front line of a new global struggle. By 1949, the split was official. In the West stood the Federal Republic of Germany, democratic, capitalist, and rebuilding fast with American help through the Marshall Plan. In the East stood the German Democratic Republic, or East Germany, controlled by the Soviets and ruled with an iron hand. 2 Germanys, 2 systems, 2 futures. Life in West Germany began to bloom again. Factories reopened, cities were rebuilt, and the economy boomed. Volkswagen cars rolled off assembly lines, and the Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle, turned the West into a symbol of success. People found jobs, families grew, and a new confidence filled the air. But in East Germany, life was much harder. The government, loyal to Moscow, kept tight control over everything. Jobs, travel, even thoughts. Stasi agents spied on citizens. People feared their neighbors might be informants. Many longed for freedom and a chance at a better life. In the 1950s, thousands of East Germans escaped to the West, walking or taking trains through Berlin, the only open path left. But in 1961, that path closed forever. Under cover of night, East German soldiers began building a wall, a line of concrete, wire, and guard towers that cut the city in half. Families were split. Friends found themselves on opposite sides. The Berlin Wall became the most powerful symbol of the Cold War. Freedom on one side, fear on the other. For nearly 30 years, the wall stood as a scar across Europe. West Berlin became an island of democracy surrounded by communist territory. American planes dropped supplies during the Berlin airlift. Speeches like John F. Kennedy's "Ich bin ein Berliner" gave hope to those trapped behind the wall. Yet every year, more people tried to escape. Some made it, others were shot in the attempt. Their stories became legends of courage and loss. Through the 1970s and 80s, change began to stir. New leaders in the Soviet Union talked about reform. Music, television, and Western ideas slipped quietly across the border. Young East Germans began to question the old system. They wanted freedom to speak, to travel, to dream. By 1989, pressure was boiling. Protests filled the streets of East German cities. People shouted, "Wir sind das Volk! We are the people." The government could no longer ignore them. Then on November 9, 1989, something miraculous happened. Confused by orders and overwhelmed by crowds, East German guards opened the checkpoints. The Berlin Wall, that gray monster of concrete and fear, was no more. Thousands of people climbed on top of it, hugging, crying, singing. East and West Germans met as one again, under the same sky. Less than a year later, on October 3, 1990, Germany was officially reunited. Church bells rang across the land. Flags waved. Tears of joy and disbelief filled the air. After 45 years of division, Germany was whole once more, ready to begin again. From ashes to empire, from empire to ruin, and from ruin to unity. Germany's story was not over. A new chapter was about to begin. When the Berlin Wall came down in 1989, the world cheered. But for Germany, that was only the beginning of another great challenge, rebuilding a country that had been torn in two for nearly half a century. Reunification was more than politics. It was about people, families learning to live together again after decades apart, and cities learning to grow as one. The streets of East Berlin filled with colors and brands they had never seen before. Western stores opened, old factories closed, and new opportunities began to rise. Yet it wasn't easy. The East had suffered under years of control and poverty. Roads, schools, and industries were far behind. While the West thrived, the East struggled to catch up. Billions of marks flowed from west to east, rebuilding roads, restoring towns, and bringing new life to old cities. But rebuilding trust, that took longer. Still, the German people did what they always had. They worked hard, they planned, and they built. In just a few years, the skyline of Berlin changed again. Cranes stood over the city like iron giants, raising new towers and dreams. The Reichstag, once burned and broken, rose again with a shining glass dome, a symbol of transparency and a new democracy. Germany stepped proudly into a new age, united, peaceful, and ready to lead. It became the heart of a new Europe. In 1993, the European Union was formed, and Germany became one of its strongest voices. The new euro currency arrived in 1999, replacing the beloved Deutsche Mark. Across the continent, Germany's stability and discipline became a foundation for Europe's growth. Through the 2000s, Germany faced new challenges: global trade, technology, and migration. But it also rose to meet them. It became a world leader in engineering, science, and green energy. German cars, BMW, Audi, Mercedes, became symbols of excellence. Its universities attracted students from around the world, and its people, once divided, now moved together toward a shared future. Then came the crises: the financial crash of 2008, the refugee crisis of 2015, and the pandemic of 2020. Each time, Germany was tested. Each time, it stood firm. Chancellor Angela Merkel, often called the Mother of Europe, became one of the most respected leaders in the world. She guided Germany with calm and reason, balancing compassion with responsibility. When Europe trembled, Germany steadied it. As the 21st century moved forward, Germany also faced its past: the pain of war, the shame of the Holocaust, the wounds of division. But instead of hiding from it, Germany taught it. Its schools, museums, and memorials became places of remembrance and learning. Through honesty and humility, the nation found strength in acknowledging its history. By the 2020s, Germany had become one of the most powerful and peaceful nations on earth, a leader in science, innovation, and diplomacy. Its cities, Berlin, Munich, Frankfurt, Hamburg, pulsed with creativity and culture. From art and film to technology and renewable energy, Germany looked toward the future while never forgetting its past. And now in 2025, as the world faces new challenges, climate change, conflict, and transformation, Germany stands once again at the center of history. But this time, not as an empire or a conqueror, but as a builder of peace and progress. From the forests of ancient Germania to the glass towers of modern Berlin, the German story has been one of endurance. It has known both greatness and guilt, both ruin and rebirth. And through it all, one truth remains: no matter how many times Germany has fallen, it has always found a way to rise again. The spirit of Germany lives not in the power of its armies, but in the strength of its people, to rebuild, to unite, and to hope.